meaning that if the size of the fight in the dog becomes clearer, then the African Union indeed has what it takes to stop the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
I want to talk a little bit about the African Union, if that is okay by you.
Yep, that's okay.
So before the African Union, we had, in the words and visions of Kwame Nkrumah, to have a united Africa, a united state of Africa.
Yeah.
And then somewhere in 2002, that got disbanded, right? It was dissolved and the African Union was birthed. If you wanted to compare the two, do you think that the African Union in its states right now is continuing the legacy of the United Africa dream, or are these like two separate entities?
Yeah, actually, we are still experiencing the tension that was there in the early 60s. The Organization of African Unity, or AU, that was founded, I believe it was in 1963, was initially not the dream of Kwame Nkrumah. He preferred a United States of Africa.
Right.
But other heads of state at the time were not really for that idea. So the compromise was the Organization of African Unity. Now, the argument can be made that that which you call a rose by any other name, it still smells as sweet, in the words of William Shakespeare. But the converse of that is true, that whether you're calling it the Organization of African Unity, what really mattered was what was the spirit behind it, what was the driving force behind it. I subscribe to Nkrumah's vision that what we really needed was a truly united Africa, even if there were separate entities, separate countries, but there was a need to have a super glue, if you will, through a powerful transport organization that wouldn't just be like a little United Nations, but rather have some real power to influence the goings on in African countries. So when that dream was killed, and when we ended up with a hybrid of the Organization of African Unity that primarily agitated for political independence, because at that time, a number of African countries were still not independent. Then now, fast forward 2002, now we have the African Union, which, truth be told, was not like a revolutionary departure or upgrade, if you will. It was not a software upgrade. Rather, it was, in my thinking, just a cosmetic change from one name to another name. But in terms of the actual meat, that wasn't there. The vision was clear that we needed to have an African Union. But by this time in 2002, Rico, the problem was that we did not have the likes of Nkrumah, the likes of Haile Selassie, those founding fathers of the Organization of African Unity. But we then ended up with a small measure of that, or a measure of that, through what we call the New Partnership for Africa's Development, which was still an initiative under the African Union, but at least it had like visionary founding fathers, Olusegun Obasanjo of Nigeria. We had Abdoulaye Wade of Senegal. We had in South Africa, Thabo Mbeki. These guys were really championing the New Partnership for Africa's Development. Through that, we had an initiative like the Great Green Wall that sought to from Djibouti to Senegal, to plant trees across that entire area. So there was an attempt to have not national, but continental projects like those ones. We also have in African Union really good initiatives. For example, there's a target of having a railway line that is cutting across the length and breadth of Africa. But here's a problem. It is not the size of the dog in the fight that matters. Rather, it is the size of the fight in the dog.
Right.
So currently, the African Union, the size of the dog is clear. Awesome, awesome. If you look at the website of the African Union, we have awesome programs that are there. The latest one being the free trade, the Africa Free Trade Continental Area. I think I got the acronyms wrong, but the idea is to be able to trade freely across Africa.
Right.
Yeah, so all things like those are very clear, but what is not clear and what is really needed is for the size of the fight in the dog to become clear, and that falls back to the 1.4 billion Africans. Because unless we the people subscribe to a united Africa, to a situation where I can be able to sell something to South Africa, South Africa can be able to sell something to Liberia. And if somebody wants to travel from Uganda to Ghana through the Democratic Republic of Congo, they can easily do that. These are the practical things that need the Africans themselves to fuel them. Now, I'm going to tell you a very practical way of achieving that. But let me just clarify one final thing. If you are to travel from Uganda to Ghana, you have to pass through Central Africa at some point. So the problem is that whether it is Central African Republic or the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have lingering conflicts that the African Union has been unable to tackle.
Right.
Yeah. But I must give the African Union credit for the Darfur War, because in the Darfur War, where that was a genocide for all intents and purposes against the Black Sudanese, the ethnic Africans in Darfur. And the African Union played a pivotal role of bringing that to an end. Meaning that if the size of the fight in the dog becomes clearer, then the African Union indeed has what it takes to stop the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And in Central African Republic. The problem, Rico, is this. When you look at the Central African Republic, you have like the WANA group. The WANA group is calling the shots there.
Right.
And that is a bilateral agreement between the Central African Republic and the WANA group. The proponents of that arrangement say that the WANA group has brought a lot of security to Central African Republic. But that now, if you're going to outsource your own national security, there's a big problem. If you look at DRC, the WANA group is not there, but you have a number of splintered armed organizations, like M23, for instance, that ensure that there's an active conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So of course it's impossible for me to say that I'm going to travel by road from Nairobi, Uganda, Rwanda, and then go into the Democratic Republic of Congo and then cross over to Cameroon. That's not possible. But my point is that those are the practical matters that we have to answer. That if Africans are going to travel freely within Africa, number one, we need peace. Number two, we then need to have fast railway crisscrossing the continent. Then you can talk about, practically speaking, now we can really sell stuff to one another in an easy way. But as long as we cannot do that, as long as we cannot travel freely, as long as our goods cannot move freely along the length and breadth of the continent, then we risk being reduced to elitist arguments of what kind of Africa do we want and what is possible. Now, practically speaking, Rico, this is what should happen, because at the end of the day now we need a practical way forward.
Right.
Practically speaking, we need the 1.4 billion Africans to start waking up to the reality that we are the people who have to make Africa work for us.
Right.
Put aside the philosophies, first of all, and realize that it is in our own best interests, economically and socially, and to an extent even spiritually, for the people and goods of Africa to move freely within this continent. If Africans themselves prioritize that, it means that they are going to then exert pressure on the political leaders, on the economic leaders, the Dangotes of this world, to come together to ensure that this movement of goods and people is actualized sooner rather than later, to demand for peace, so that the people, the foreign players and the local players who are messing up the Democratic Republic of Congo's quest for peace, who are doing the same in Central African Republic, who are doing the same in the Sahel region. You see, we are then going to ensure that peace is restored, because without peace, all these things become a moot point. Let me quickly touch on the Sahel region, because it speaks to the other challenge we face of even unifying what is happening in Africa. Much as Muammar Gaddafi had his own issues, but he was a proponent of a United States of Africa. People may not know this, but we have the Pan-African Scholarship. We have the Pan-African Scholarship that has helped in the education at the master's level and the PhD level of so many Africans, and that was Muammar Gaddafi's brainchild. So you see, that is a practical solution that was touching the length and breadth of Africa. So we need more stuff like that. In that case, it could only happen because Gaddafi also had the muscle to back it up. So if, for example, America, which was opposed to Gaddafi up to the very end, but I did not see America doing something equivalent to that Pan-African Scholarship program that he did. Now, he's no longer with us, so we cannot dwell on that more. But the point I was going to make is that when Gaddafi was then overthrown with the support of NATO during that period, the world must then appreciate that after Libya fell, it became possible for the insurgents to infiltrate the Sahel region. And to date, there has never been peace. But the genesis of all that was when the geopolitics of Libya at that time was completely mishandled. For the records, there were 5 African heads of state who at that time wanted to go to Libya to help in mediation, but NATO was not interested in that. NATO did not allow that to happen. This is not a conspiracy theory. Anybody can do their independent research and they'll confirm that. So that exemplifies the kind of foreign interference that has been in Africa from before independence to this time. You mentioned that you're from Liberia, right?
Yes.
Originally, yeah. So I'm sure you know how Firestone parachuted into Liberia, how they then got a right to lease as many as 1 million acres to plant rubber, how in 1951, the profits of Firestone were 3 times the national revenue of Liberia.
Yep.